Welcome to the Flex Rental Solutions webinar. Today we're going to be talking about transfer orders. Not only how you can build and receive a transfer order, but also some of the transfer order settings that are deep within your system. So the first thing that we want to do is explain exactly what a transfer order does. So some of you this might not even apply to, but if you have multiple business locations in your Flex system, essentially what that means is that you can have tracking for each piece of your inventory for each location. So for example, this Beta 58 microphone, I have 21 in my Salt Lake City location, 20 in my Denver location. And of course this number means the first one is what I have on hand, the second one is what I own. So essentially this means that everything that's in my warehouse right now is all that I own. And I have nothing that's out on a job right now. So sometimes you will want to transfer gear from one warehouse to another. And so that's where a transfer order comes in. A transfer order is a very specific element in the system, just like a quote or a pull sheet or anything else. And when you create a transfer order and you prep that transfer order to be sent, it will create, just like when you're prepping a pull sheet, it will create a manifest, what we call a transfer manifest. And I'll show you how all of these work as we get into this webinar here. The first thing that I want to look at is most of the time when you get multiple locations set up in your system, then Flex Support will set everything up exactly how you need it. But sometimes maybe some of those settings got changed, or maybe if you have a little bit of an older system and you've added a new location, there might be a particular setup element that was missed. So I want to look at a few of the different things that you need to do to set up transfer orders properly in your system. So if you are finding issues with your transfer orders, then you might want to pay special attention to this. Because you'll be able to see exactly all of the settings that go into the transfer orders. Before we go here on the projects, I actually want to go to the Financials menu and then click Automation Profiles. And by default, you should have this set up. We have what's called a transfer profile. If you don't have a transfer profile in your system and you have multiple locations, so you need a transfer profile, then you'll just click New Transfer Automation Profile, and then fill in the information, which I will show in just a minute as I open my existing transfer profile. So you'll just call it the transfer profile. The target transfer order definition is going to be transfer order. In fact, that's why I wanted to go to the projects menu first, because if you don't have your transfer order element activated, then this won't show up on this menu at all and you won't be able to choose it. So before you go to the automation profiles, go to the projects menu, project elements, and then we're going to look at our transfer order and transfer manifest. Like I said, typically Flex Support will activate this for you and set it all up for you the way that you need it when you set up multiple locations. But I just want to show you exactly what we do, just in case you're experiencing any problems in your system, you'll know what the settings are and what they should look like. For some of you, this enabled for the transfer manifest, the transfer manifest and the transfer order might say no. So to enable that, you'll just double click on the element. So let's start with the transfer order. And then you'll want to make sure that it is enabled, yes. Top level element will be yes as well. And really what that means is that it will show up on a menu. So you would choose yes, top level element, and then down here you choose which menu it will show up on. And typically you'll probably want that on your project module, so that when you click on the projects menu, then you'll be able to click on transfer orders and see all of the existing transfer orders in your system. And for transfer orders, you will probably also want to say show on new element menu yes. So basically that will say when you go to this new menu over here, then you'll have the option to create a transfer order from scratch. Keep in mind, if you enable this to show on the new element menu and top level element yes and show on the project menu, you'll have to do a full reset or refresh, I should say, of your system. So just reload your browser and then you will see those things appear on those respective menus. So those are the settings that you will want to have activated, yes, and the menu that you'll want it to appear on for the transfer order. You'll also want to go to your transfer manifest. And number 1, just make sure that it's enabled, yes. If you want it to appear on the menu, then top level element yes and choose which menu it appears on. In my system, I did want transfer manifest to show up on the projects menu, so I could view those if needed. And then show on new element menu, we typically keep as no, because you don't necessarily want to create a new transfer manifest, because a transfer manifest is the document that Flex will automatically create once you start scanning gear out from a transfer order. So really, if you're creating a new element from scratch, you only want to create the transfer order, and the transfer manifest will be created automatically once you start scanning. So those are the settings that you want to make sure are enabled and set for your transfer manifest and transfer order in the project element settings. And so at that point, you can go to the automation profiles and then either create a new transfer automation profile if you don't have one, or you could double click on your transfer profile and make sure that the target transfer order definition is transfer order. By default, we set up preserve subtotals as yes, and the suggested transfer order arrival window will basically just tell the system when you create a transfer order from a quote, then this is how many days in advance the transfer order date will be before the quote. So for example, I have this quote here that ships on the 21st, and if I create a transfer order for this quote, which we will in a minute, then the transfer order will default to 1 day before this, so 7/20. Really, this just depends on your warehouse locations, how far apart they are, and how long you expect the gear to arrive between locations. So if you have locations that are essentially in the same city or within maybe 50 or 100 miles, you'd probably just say that 1 is the suggested arrival window. With my locations being Salt Lake and Denver and San Francisco, it might take 2 or possibly even 3 days for that gear to arrive. So if I put the order arrival window as 3, now when I go create a transfer order for this quote, then the date for the transfer order that needs to be shipped will be 3 days before the date of the quote. And then the last 2 options are advanced options. We won't be looking at those now. But if you're creating a new one, you'll click Create, or if you're updating anything, you'll just click Update. And so we're almost done with the transfer order setup here. Just to review, we went and enabled the transfer order and transfer manifest in the project element settings. Then we went to financials, automation profiles, and made sure we had a transfer profile set up. The last step that we have to do now is go back to the projects menu, project element settings. First, we're going to start with the quote. And what we have to do is set up the quote to know that when we set up any sort of transfer, it's going to use that transfer automation profile. So once we have the quote settings open, we'll go to the accounting options tab. And there's one option right here called transfer automation profile. And you'll just choose the transfer profile that you either created or updated in the financials automation profile section. Click update if you've made any changes. And then the last thing you want to do is go to the pull sheet project element settings. We don't have an accounting options tab on here, so we'll go to the equipment list options. Find transfer automation profile and make sure you choose transfer profile, so just like we did on the quote. But then also on the equipment transfer element, you're going to choose transfer order. Click update to save any changes. And we have a question in the chat room about the transfer order workflow. Let's open the settings for a transfer order. You can see by default there is no workflow. That would be a different webinar and a different lesson to show how you can set up a transfer order workflow. But by default, we just have it as none. And you'll kind of see why as we start going through the workflow process of a transfer order. But just if you want to, then you can go to the projects menu, workflow, and actually create a workflow for your transfer orders. But Flex by default does not have one set up. Okay, so now that we have all those settings, let's go to a test quote. And we're just going to do a really simple example of how you would attach a transfer order to a quote when you have a shortage of gear on a quote. So as you can see, I have this Beta 58 microphone. I need 30, and this is a quote that's originating from my Salt Lake City warehouse. If you remember, I only own 21 out of my Salt Lake City warehouse. So since I'm requesting 30, I have a conflict of -9. I can click on the cogwheel and go to my conflicts window. And of course, there's several different options I could use. I could subrent, purchase, substitute even. But we're going to look at the transfer option. It's going to show me my different locations and what I have available in those particular locations. If you have some existing transfer orders in your system, then it will also recommend some of those because maybe you want to be able to just add everything to one transfer order instead of having multiple ones. I don't want to add it to this one though. Let's create a new separate transfer order. So I'm going to double click on my Denver location because it looks like I have enough available in my Denver location. So I'll double click on that, and that's going to create a brand new transfer order as a child to this quote. So I'll double click on that just to see what's happening here. And as you can see, the transfer order automatically set up. So the origin warehouse is Denver. The destination is Salt Lake City. And the ship date, it looks like I maybe didn't click update correctly on that setting because that should have been a little bit before instead of just the 1 day ahead of the quote. But that's fine. And the arrival date as well. And you can also see that the quantity automatically was adjusted to the quantity that I needed to fulfill the conflict. And now that I have a transfer order set up as a child to this quote, then the conflict has been resolved because the quote now knows that I have something coming, and I could look at my logistics view and see I'm getting transferred 9 from the Denver location. I can make any changes to this if I want. So for example, maybe I just want to send a few extra just to be safe. So I could change that to 12, and it's still going to give me my availability for my Denver location, so I don't put too many on there that I don't actually own in that location. So from here, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, you want to make sure that you are currently operating from your Denver location or whichever location the transfer order's origin warehouse is from. When you have the transfer order open, you can go to the prep screen. And to verify that you're in the correct location, you would go down to current location here, click change, and choose the location from which you're working. If you have a home base location set up in your contact entry, then it will just say this doesn't match your home base location. It's fine, it's just warning you that this is not your home base, but it will still let you work out of that location. Now, I've seen a few issues coming into our support email recently where people say that they prepped a transfer order and received it, but it didn't remove from the original location, it didn't receive into the new location. And I would say 95% of the time, in fact 99% of the time, would be because the current location was not changed. And that'll happen sometimes because if you have in your contact entry on the term/notes tab, if you've tied your username to your contact entry, and if you have a home base location, then Flex will automatically log you into that home base location. So right now, because my home base is Salt Lake, then that's why when I went to the transfer or the prep screen, it automatically had me in Salt Lake City. And so a lot of times this won't be a problem if, for example, one of my employees has a home base location of Denver. When he logs in, he'll just automatically be in the Denver location. And so when he goes to the transfer order and goes to the prep screen, then he'll automatically just be in the correct location. But I still recommend always verifying, just looking at the transfer order, seeing what the origin is, and making sure that you are in that location when you're prepping the job, or the transfer order, I should say. The other way that you can get to a transfer order, and let me close these down, you can just go to the warehouse menu and click Prep Transfer Order. And this will show all of the transfer orders that are awaiting prep. I believe it searches for the next week or so. And so a warehouse manager in the Denver location could just every morning go to Prep Transfer Order screen and see what he has coming up. Double click on the name and it will automatically bring them to the prep screen for that transfer order. And again, just verify that they are in the correct location. And so to prep, it's just like you are prepping a normal job. You would just scan the barcodes. So for example, since these are serialized, then I would scan each barcode that I'm prepping from my Denver location. Since I don't physically have those here in my office, I'm just going to do a virtual scan. And we're going to prep 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So just pretend that I'm actually scanning each individual barcode, but like I said, we're going to cheat really quick just for the sake of time. And then after it's prepped, be sure to click Finalize as well. What happens here, if we go back and look at the item information for that particular microphone, because it was prepped, those items that I prep need to go somewhere. So first you'll notice my Denver location has been reduced by 12. And if I look at the units, you can see that the ones that I prepped are now currently shown on this Denver transfer order. So what will happen now is as soon as they are received physically into the receiving warehouse, which remember, or I should say the destination warehouse to go with the terminology of what the transfer order is set up like. As soon as these are received to my destination warehouse, which is Salt Lake City, then somebody from the Salt Lake City location can go to Receive Transfer Manifest on the warehouse menu. And then they can search for all of them that have been prepped and are upcoming. So we can see this one here. It was prepped, coming from Denver. Double click on that. And again, now that I'm in my Salt Lake location, I'm going to verify that I am in the correct location because I'm receiving them to my Salt Lake location now. And again, I would recommend scanning each individual barcode. But for this webinar, I'm just going to cheat and scan all items in virtually. Then click Finalize. So now if I go back to my Beta 58 microphone, then you can see that the allocated quantity has actually been reduced out of Denver because right now, technically Denver only owns 8 and has 8 in their warehouse. The rest of them have been shipped to Salt Lake City and the allocated quantity has been added. And so now I could go to my big event and first of all notice since I received 3 extra than I actually needed, then the availability on the quote says I now have 3 more if I want, so I could add, let's go to my working view. I could add a few more to the job if I want, but let's not do that now. And then I could create a pull sheet, confirm the quote, create a pull sheet, and prep this job, and I can be able to prep the ones that I received into my Salt Lake City location. If you need to send those back to the Denver location, we recommend just creating a transfer order from scratch. And then I can say that this is my Beta 58s going back to Denver, or something like that. And say when I'm going to ship it. Let's say that we have a truck going out on the 31st. We expect it to arrive the next Monday. It's coming from Salt Lake and it's going back to Denver. And I would just drag and drop, just like I'm building a quote, how many of that item I'm sending back. And then we just go through the same process. Make sure I'm in the destination warehouse, which is Salt Lake City. I'll prep 12. I think that's 12. Ideally, you would send back the same ones that they sent to you, but you can do it however you want. Well, let's do one more. I would finalize, and then when these actually are received in the Denver warehouse on Monday, somebody in the Denver warehouse would go to receive transfer manifest, and then find the one that I had just created, which I think was this one. Oh, that was the one I did earlier. That's right, I named it Beta 58's going back. They would open that, verify that they're in the correct location, and then scan them in. And so now they're effectively back in the Denver location. We didn't do this example with non-serialized items, but it essentially works the same. You would just put a non-serialized item on the transfer order, and then when you prep it, it would just give you a quantity prompt, and you would say how many that you're scanning, and it would transfer that many. There's also a couple easier ways that you can do it if you don't necessarily need the record of a transfer order. We typically recommend, yes, creating a transfer order just so you have a paper trail of I created a transfer order, so-and-so scanned them and did this. But a lot of times, say for example, somebody's just over in the Denver warehouse. They're from Salt Lake City, but they went over to the Denver warehouse for a meeting. And let's say that they said, I just want to grab like 4 of these microphones just because. And first let's reload this so the quantities update properly. And let's just say I'm going to grab 4 of these microphones because I don't have a specific job just yet, but I know that I have a pretty busy August and I'm probably going to need at least a couple more. So they could just grab those microphones and maybe just do a free scan out, and then when they go back to their Salt Lake City location, just do a free scan in. And those will automatically just be received into their Salt Lake City location. So to show you what I mean by that, let's find a serial unit that is currently in Denver, 00842. And if I just free scan that in to my Salt Lake City location, and if I go back and look at, remember it was 00842, that's now telling me that its current location is Salt Lake City. So that's a really simple way that you can transfer gear if you don't necessarily need the paper trail of having transfer orders and all of that. You can easily just free scan anything into whatever current location you're in, and it will put that gear into that location. There is a cool little feature where you can track each serial unit. If you open a serial unit and go to Edit Serial Number Detail, you can choose if it has a home base location. So let's say I always want this to live in Denver. It can be transferred back and forth, but with its home base location, if I try to free scan that in to any other location, then it's going to pop up a message that says the home location for this is Denver. Please make arrangements to return it to its home location. So it still lets me scan it in, but it's going to give me that message just notifying me that this has a home base location set as Denver. You should really try to get it back there. And if you don't see that message, that's in your inventory settings here on the inventory menu. And near the bottom, you have an option. It might be a little bit higher here. Oh, yes, right here. Home location warnings. You just make sure that that's set to yes. And then, of course, if you want to transfer non-serialized items without creating a transfer order and going through that whole process, then it's really just a simple matter of changing quantities. So I could say I'm removing 10 of these from my San Francisco location. And let's say I'm going to remove them for good. So I'm only going to have an allocated quantity of 20 in San Francisco from now on. And then I want to add those 10 to whichever location I'm bringing them to. So again, just a couple ways to do it. I typically prefer doing the full transfer order process and just making sure that you have that paper trail, but you can do it without a transfer order if you wish. Okay, so I think we've covered everything about the transfer orders. Again, we always invite you to go to our forum, look at our webinars board, and you can find the specific topic for this webinar where you can discuss transfer orders further. If you have certain tips or tricks that you use in your transfer orders, or if you have any other questions, the forum is a great place to get some answers from either Flex support or from other users. And if you have some more questions that are more technical in nature, then we ask that you email support@flexrentalsolutions.com.